Thank you, Elias, and thank everybody for being here. And thank you, Father Pat and Father Kalis, for allowing us to give this presentation tonight. So, as Elias said, my topic tonight is not many Catholics know a lot about Laudato Si. It's an encyclical that's been out since 2015. So I'm going to, and ironically, about 4 or 5 months ago, I got asked by a Presbyterian church to explain Laudato Si to them. So that's what prompted me to put this presentation together. So anyway, once again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. So what I'm going to cover is our beautiful planet, like what's happening. And then there's been, our church is not standing idly by. We are actively responding to the problem, the crisis. So I'm going to talk about the path to the Laudato Si, the encyclical, then Pope Francis' encyclical itself, and then Pope Leo. Pope Leo has now been Pope for about a year. So, and he has spoken out. And then awareness into action. This is kind of a good time to talk about this because not long ago, the Artemis II mission went, on the other side of the moon. First time we've been up to the moon in, 50 years or whatever. So that mission and Earth Day recently also invite us to pause and reflect on our planet. And one of the astronauts named Victor Glover shared a powerful perspective from space, and that's an actual picture, by the way, from the spacecraft as they're going around the moon. And so he said, surrounded by the vast emptiness of space, Earth, stood out. Personally, I can't imagine just being able to see that from space. That must have been incredible. He described seeing a bright blue dot, an oasis through the spacecraft window, and the Earth is a place of beauty where we exist together. So Earth is the only known planet capable of supporting life. I mean, there's billions of them. Does that mean we're the only one? Maybe not, but it's the only one we've got. It's an isolated oasis in a cold, infinite universe. I mean, our Earth is surrounded by the blackness of space. Okay, I mean, we have the moon nearby, but we're called to protect this fragile, extraordinary gift that God has given us. And I'm going to have these little kind of blue highlights on some of the slides because whenever there's something in Laudato Si that the Pope has said, and this is his very first paragraph, he says, the Earth is our common home, a beautiful mother who opens her arms to embrace us. So our atmosphere, that's really one of the things we got to think about because it's our fragile shield around our planet. And there's something called the Kármán line. It's not a hard boundary, but it's kind of the rough representation of the transition between Earth and the vacuum of space. And it's 60 miles from sea level, okay, or 100 kilometers. And if you were to go 60 miles from where we are right now, Spring, Texas, that could take you to about Brenham. So if you think about that, and you think about, the Earth's 24,000 miles in circumference and 8,000 miles in diameter, just think about that dimension. And so our atmosphere is a thin, and it literally is an onion skin around our planet. And this onion skin is the protection that makes life on Earth possible. It shields us from harmful solar radiation, cosmic rays, and burns up most of the meteors. I mean, we don't look like the moon for a reason because meteors that are inbound get burned up before they reach the Earth. And the other thing that's really incredibly important, it regulates our temperature and maintains a delicate balance needed for water ecosystems and human life. So if you're on the moon without much of an atmosphere, I think on one side it gets like 250 degrees. I don't know if that's centigrade or Fahrenheit, I can't remember. And the other side, it's like minus 180 or minus 200 degrees. So it has a huge difference whether you're irradiated by the sun or not. Well, we have the blanket that protects us and keeps our temperatures livable. And so that's what's incredibly important about our atmosphere. So all life on Earth depends on this fragile protective boundary we're called to respect and protect. And so once again, think how small that is, and then think about the vastness of space around us. It's mind-boggling to think about how actually thin, and I think onion skin is a really good analogy. So what happened? Well, the Industrial Revolution happened. And if you take a look at the Industrial Revolution, you have to go back to right around 1850-ish. That's when in the United Kingdom or England, that's what the advent of the Industrial Revolution, when they started mining coal. So the black here is coal that's been mined over it's coming up on 150 years. And you can see that it keeps ramping up. And when you mine it and then burn it, that's basically sequestered carbon dioxide, or sequestered carbon that's now released into our atmosphere. Some of it's absorbed, some of it's not. Some of it ends up in the atmosphere, and that keeps building, okay? The other thing that happened is right around 1920, you had the start of the oil and gas industry. And so the orange here is oil, and the red is gas. So you can see that you can just look at this incredible amount of CO2 or fossil fuels that's been produced since 1850. And then you have other things also. You have nuclear is the gray, blue is the hydroelectric, and you can see now we're starting to get wind and solar and geothermal and so forth. But this is what we've done. We had an equilibrium that existed before the Industrial Revolution, and then as population increased, I think the population of the world was around in 1800 was roughly 1 billion people, and we're now 9.5. So that's also a factor. But this goes from present time, which is 0 here. That's where we are right now. It goes back 800,000 years. So almost 1 million years, okay? And for millennia, we never went above that line. And 300 parts per million carbon dioxide. You say, well, how do you know that? Well, if you drill down in the glaciers are kind of like drilling into a tree. You got all these layers, right? Each layer you can pull out the little gas pockets, and you can measure the carbon dioxide. So you know what it was. And the interesting thing, if you're into geology, I'm into geology. The peaks here are warm periods, and the troughs are cold periods. So you have this regular warm periods followed by ice ages. Warm period, ice age. And it's almost, it's a pretty regular, about 100 to 120,000 years between ice ages. The other thing is, think about human history. That's us. See that little vertical yellow line? If you look in this continuum of time, that is human history. And what I'm talking about there is basically from like Abraham to now, which is 4,000-ish years to now. So that's how thin, a slice of time that humans have been influencing the planet. And what happened? We actually right now should be slowly going back down into a ice age again. Well, that's not happening because look what's happened to carbon dioxide. It's gone up 50% since 1950. And then it's a trace element, and it's parts per million, right? But that really matters. That has a huge impact on our climate. And so in my lifetime, we've added almost 50% to the atmosphere in terms of carbon dioxide. And that's not good. That's just not good. And we know that now. And the thing is, we just need to do something about it. I'm not going to be up here saying that what we did was wrong, because frankly, the oil industry and coal and everything has allowed humans to progress. It's been wonderful, but now that we know what we're doing, we should be doing something about it. What then is the Catholic response? And I'm not going to go into each one of these documents, but if you go through the history of the Catholic Church, and this whole series is about social teaching. Well, the popes have been writing encyclicals and papal letters and so forth since forever. But I'm going to do kind of modern history from 1963 onwards. So you have Pope John Paul XXIII, the document he wrote, Global Responsibility. 1967, Pope Paul VI, Concern for the Global Poor. You're going to see some themes coming out here. 1991, you have Pope John Paul II. He critiqued consumerism, rampant consumerism, waste, how much stuff we waste here in the West. 2009, Pope Benedict XVI, environmental responsibility. And then we get to the Laudato Si, which I'll cover in more detail. So going back to May 14th, 1970, and 1970 is kind of an interesting time to start because does anybody know what happened in 1970 besides this papal letter? That was the first Earth Day. So that coincided with the first Earth Day that year. And what did he say in that document? Due to an ill-considered exploitation of nature, humanity runs the risk of becoming, in turn, a victim of this degradation. And this is one of the earliest papal warnings about environmental risk and its consequences for humanity. So think about that. That's 50 plus years ago. John Paul II, in the 1990 World Day of Prayer, he said, the natural world is one of God's creations worth protecting. He also said, we cannot interfere in one area of the ecosystem without paying attention to consequences of such interference in other areas and to the well-being of future generations. Future generations, that's another ongoing theme throughout all the different popes. Concern for future generations. And I think most people probably wouldn't equate JP2 with concern, not that he didn't have concern for the environment, but he clearly was very vocal about it. And this one really is amazing. And also from the 1990 World Day of Prayer, the greenhouse effect. So he was talking about climate change. He was definitely talking about climate change back in 1990, has now reached crisis proportions as a consequence of industrial growth, massive urban concentrations, and vastly increased energy needs, industrial waste, the burning of fossil fuels, unrestricted deforestation are known to harm the atmosphere and the environment. This is what he said, I wish to repeat, the ecological crisis is a moral issue. This is our church, this is our faith, this is what we're told to be concerned about. Pope Benedict, he was also, and most people don't know this, he was known as the Green Pope. He installed solar panels on the Vatican, over 1,000 of them. So the solar energy helps power the Vatican. And his message in 2010 to the diplomatic corps was, how can we separate or even set at odds the protection of the environment and the protection of human life? So he equated the whole thing of the importance of human life from conception to natural death, because what do you have in between conception and natural death? You have the planet that we live on. And we have to have a good planet to live on, not just for us, but for future generations. And this was quite remarkable as well in 2010. So peace and creation are inseparable. Environmental degradation fuels conflict, instability, and displacement. And you could get into the history of Syria that happened, 20 years ago, that caused the instability in Europe, was caused largely by climate change. Creation is God's gift entrusted to humanity. We are stewards, not owners of the earth. We're not just allowed to do whatever we please to the environment. We're supposed to pass on our earth to our future generations as nice as we received it. Ecological responsibility is a moral issue. Once again, moral issue is brought up. Caring for the environment is part of respecting human dignity. And the poor are most affected. Environmental harm is disproportionately impacts the vulnerable. Like, in the woodlands here, we're gonna survive, we're gonna do just fine, but people that aren't gonna be able to do just fine are the poor. When they can't farm, when they're flooded, or when they go through excessive droughts and they have to move because they can no longer sustain a living, where do they go? It creates instabilities. But we're going to do okay here, and the world's not going any place. The world's going to survive, but it's kind of what's the quality that you want. And this is one of the clearest pre-Laudato Si statements linking ecology, justice, and peace. So that was Pope Benedict. So now, next Pope, obviously, would be Pope Francis. And I love this picture of him. So in 2015, he wrote the encyclical And if you didn't know, an encyclical is a formal letter from the Pope that teaches on important issues of faith, morals, or social concern. And it was not the Pope going into, adoration and talking to God and coming up with the encyclical. What he did was he was advised by the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, and the Academy dates back to the 1600s. And since its inception, it's been composed of leading scientists. Matter of fact, since 1902, 70 Nobel laureates were members of the Pontifical Academy. So the encyclical bridges faith, science, and moral responsibility. On Care for Our Common Home is the title. That's you can get it hard copy, by the way, but you can also just pull it up online. And by the way, it's a very easy read. It's a very readable document. If you've ever tried to read, I don't do this very often, but if you ever try to read an encyclical and you pick up JP2's anything he's written, good luck, because it's really hard to follow because it's so dense. You almost need an interpretation. That's not what this is. This is a very readable document. But he says creation is a gift entrusted to all humanity. The goods of the earth are intended for all people, not just the wealthy. Christians have a duty to protect the common good. Solidarity requires action for both present and future generations. Are you getting this theme? What about our kids? What about our grandkids? What about our great-grandkids? The poor and the vulnerable deserve special concern. They contributed least to environmental harm, excuse me, that has happened, but they are most affected by climate change. So in paragraph 84, he says, the entire material universe speaks of God's love and boundless affection for us. Soil, water, mountains, everything is a caress of God. Virtually, if you get an opportunity, and as Elias mentioned before, we went through this with our group, and we'll do it again. It's a beautiful document, and there's other encyclicals I think would be worth reading as well. So it's a moral and spiritual challenge. And he kind of goes back to his namesake, St. Francis of Assisi, who had a radical commitment to poverty, compassion for the marginalized, and profound love of nature. I think we've all heard about, St. Francis of Assisi. And this is his 800th year anniversary of his death, by the way. So Laudato Si calls for a renewed relationship with God, our Creator, one another, our whole human family, and the natural world. And points out, once again, the environmental crisis is also a spiritual crisis, and invites us to a deeper sense of gratitude and responsibility. So in a lot of ways, he channeled St. Francis of Assisi to help him write this document. So it's a call for ecological conversion. It starts with a call to all people of goodwill, not just Catholics, to protect our common home, which is somewhat unique. Most encyclicals are written to Catholics. It's written by the Pope for Catholics. He wrote this for all people of goodwill, all faiths. And that's probably why the Presbyterian Church I mentioned before asked me to come talk about this, because they wanted to know more about it. Everyone is asked for a deep change of heart and lifestyle to reduce overconsumption and waste. I think we all know what that is in the United States. Adopt more sustainable everyday habits. And we must recognize that everything's connected. Our choices affect people and the planet. And move from exploitation to care and stewardship, move from exploitation to care and stewardship of our planet. So that was 2015. Let's go 8 years later. He wrote a follow-up called Laudate Deum. And quite frankly, that document was written because he was not happy. There's been inadequate progress has been made. The crisis is worsening. Calls out weak political responses, denial, and indifference. And I give presentations fairly frequently. This is the part that drives me absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. It's the denial and indifference. And that's not just Catholics, that's a lot of, many people. But I think if you really recognize what the problem is, we have to do something about it. Wealthier nations bear greater responsibility for emissions. We have about 4% of the world's population. We produce 25% of the world's carbon dioxide pollution. Let that sink in. That's not the way I think God intended for equal sharing or fair sharing of the wealth of the world. The poor continue to suffer disproportionately, and he reiterates climate change is real, human-caused, and urgent. That's really important. It's real, it's human-caused, and urgent. And the time to act is now. And so what's the position of Pope Leo? And I want to say I'm very proud of this photograph. I took that photograph. Thank you. We were in Rome in December, and I got within 10 feet of the Pope, so it was pretty exciting. But he says, Laudato Si and Laudate Deum remain urgent and foundational. He continues to call for concrete action and true ecological conversion. The climate crisis is linked to justice and dignity. He focuses on the vulnerable. We must prioritize those most impacted by environmental harm and the cry of the poor. Every single pope, I think you could go back as long as you want, is going to talk about the cry of the poor. And if you go look and read anything in the Bible, I think Jesus mentions concern for the poor more than once. And he criticizes weak political will and delayed global response. So he basically completely supports what Pope Francis has done before him. And this is interesting, I thought, because the COP30 happened maybe 4 or 5 months after he became Pope. In November 2025, he says, "We are guardians of creation, not rivals for its spoils." And I'm not going to go into any detail on this, but just let it be known that Catholic Church is not the only one speaking out. Every single one of these, you can look it up online. They have a very public document about it's real, it's us, and we need to do something about it. So awareness into action. The question is, what can be done? And we want you. Live, and these are kind of simple things, but live sustainably and consider stepping up into advocacy. I'll talk a little bit more about all these. But personal choices matter: energy use, diet, sustainable consumption, etc. But the biggest impact is accomplished through collective action, advocacy. I mean, everybody I think has the same feeling. I'm just one person out of 9 billion on the planet. What could I possibly do to influence this? And that's true to some degree, but if everybody still has to do their own contribution. But the biggest impact is when you do collective action and get into advocacy. So our power, our planet, everyday choices, improve home efficiency, insulation and smart thermostats. This stuff isn't expensive. You know, if you get in a smart thermostat, it's not that expensive and it can save you a lot of money. Switch to renewable electricity. Now, most of you probably live in the Woodlands and you don't have a choice, unfortunately. I live in Harris County, and it's amazing. I think I had to re-up my power plan. I think there's probably about 100 different plans, and out of that, maybe a quarter or a third are green plans. And they don't cost much different than regular plans, maybe a penny per kilowatt hour. Electrify your major appliances. Like, you can get heat pumps. Now, this is not something that's easy to find in Texas yet, but they're coming, okay? Up north, and then I know in the Northeast, particularly Maine, a lot of people have converted over to heat pumps, and you save a lot of money with a heat pump. And it's not just it's both air conditioning and heating. Electrical appliances are cleaner and more efficient than their counterparts. Replace old appliances with Energy Star choices, which use less energy and save you money. And many times when you go into like Best Buy and you're looking at the cost between two different washing machines or whatever, is not that great to get one that's more efficient. You can choose an EV or a high efficiency vehicle for your next car. Drive less, carpool, transit, use a bike when possible. But here's the thing, and I'm not going to stand up here and say, I do all this stuff. I don't. But what I do is I try to say, well, this year I want to accomplish one more thing. Let me move toward more energy efficiency in my home. So you don't have to do this all at once because that's going to make it feel overwhelming. Okay, diet. Okay, this is one where people are going to throw stuff at me. Reduce beef consumption, full stop. And switch to pork or chicken, eat more plant-based meals. And what this shows is the greenhouse gas emissions across the supply chain this is the amount of greenhouse gases on average, okay, this is an average, for the top line here is beef, all right? And compare that to other things that you could eat instead of beef. And just to give you, beef produces huge amounts of greenhouse gases and contributes to deforestation. So I am not giving up beef, okay? But I am telling you that what I do is I make it, if I have beef, it's a special meal. I'll have beef probably once a week. And so I have a hamburger once a week, or I'll have a steak once a week. But I'm not going to go to McDonald's every single day of the week and order a hamburger. And I'm lucky, frankly, I like pork and chicken. But they're about a 10% of the impact of eating beef. And you may not have ever known that, but it produces huge amounts of greenhouse gas and deforestation. Think about what's happening in the Amazon right now. It's being deforested to help support us in our beef habit, so we can get plenty of beef to McDonald's and everything else. And the deforestation of the Amazon is going on partly because to grow more cattle. And this is an incredible statistic, but the U.S. throws away over 30% of purchased food. And it's just mind-boggling, $160 billion annually. And, it's not just stuff you throw away at home. Even like grocery stores, over time, they don't give everything to food pantries. There's stuff that goes bad still. There's a lot of waste in our country, and if we could cut out some of that'd be excellent. Personal choices: live more simply and sustainably. Buy less and buy better. Buy better means look at things in terms of durability. Don't look at something that is going to fall apart in a year. Get that furniture that's going to last a while, or something that you can repair. Avoid fashion cycles and disposable goods. Fashion cycles, when you think about when you order that shirt that comes from Thailand or from whatever, all the shipping costs, all the packaging, everything else that goes into that, getting that to your door. Support companies with credible sustainability practices. And you can compare companies online. You can look up and say, if you have a choice between a couple of different companies and you're buying a major purchase, you can see what their practices are. And excess consumption drives upstream emissions in manufacturing and supply chains. So, and this is a question, and is my wife out here? Hi, Deb. Question: how many times per week or day does Amazon visit your house? This is as she knows, this is a big pet peeve of mine. And however, I went online and checked out some stuff about Amazon. Amazon does an excellent job at getting things to your house with a low footprint. They really do. But what's the problem that we have then? Well, here's the thing. If you want something immediately, that day or next day delivery, that increases pretty substantially the amount because it's no longer being, if it comes in 4 or 5 days, then they get all those packages together for different neighbors and stuff. They can get it comes to your house more efficiently. And Amazon, like I say, and the other ones do an excellent job at that. But they said that the main thing is the going online and seeing something and saying, I've got to have that, right? Oh my gosh, I just saw that, I gotta have that. And so boom, click, it's at my door in 12 hours or whatever. That is what really drives excess consumption, excess greenhouse gases, et cetera. So finally, advocacy. Is it for you? Contact elected officials. If some bill is out there that you don't like, let them know. It's really easy. They all have their email addresses published. You can send them a note and say, don't do that. Vote with climate in mind. I'm not saying become a single issue voter, because I think that's also not good. But keep climate in mind. If there's someone that's out there running for election, I'm going to compare them to whoever they're running against, and I'm going to find out who has the better. They say it's not happening, it's bogus, or maybe they don't even talk about it. Maybe they have nothing on their website about it. So if they're not willing to do something about the problem, then I'm going to be more inclined to vote for somebody else. Just become an informed voter. Share what you know with friends and faith groups. That's what we're doing right here. And this is from paragraph 181. Pope Francis says, in the absence of pressure from the public and from civic institutions, political authorities will always be reluctant to intervene. In other words, they're not going to do a darn thing unless you tell them they have to do it. Or if you don't tell them what to do, they're going to do what the billionaire and the millionaire are telling them to do and not listen to the public. So we have to be vocal. We have to tell them what we want. And then, as Elias talked in the beginning, we have a creation care team. It is a partnership between St. Simon of Jude and St. Anthony of Padua. And I'm just going to give you the mission statement, but inspired by Catholic teaching and the Laudato Si, our creation care team is committed to educating, advocating, and guiding our community in living out the call to care for our common home. Together we seek to embrace ecological responsibility and build a more just and sustainable future for all. So, and we're always looking for ideas of different things to do, so we welcome your input. And then I'm not going to try to sell you on Citizens Climate Lobby. I've been involved with Citizens Climate Lobby since 2016, but I will say it's nonprofit, nonpartisan. It's a grassroots organization. We focus on national policy to address climate change. So, and I actually go to Washington, D.C. typically once a year and lobby Congress about the type of bills we want to see passed. Citizen Climate Lobby supports economy-wide carbon pricing. That's basically our holy grail, carbon pricing. Because right now we're putting when you burn gasoline or burn anything, we're throwing our CO2 trash into the environment, into the atmosphere. If you had a ton of trash to throw in your neighbor's yard, you can't do that, right? Or if you want to remove that ton of trash, in the city of Houston, it costs $60 per ton to get rid of that ton of trash. Or if you're in I think it's New York City, it's $125 per ton. But we dump tons and tons of CO2 into our atmosphere, which we know is bad. We now know is bad for this, for free, just because it's colorless and odorless. But there is a consequence to that, and we know that now. So anyway, that's why we think there needs to be a price on carbon. A price on carbon we can't just throw it, burn it, and throw it into the atmosphere. We have over 500 local chapters, and we have one in the Woodlands. And I actually have, if you want more information, I have little pamphlets here. So that's it. Any questions?